It's a good tuna, but I think I paid too much.
I always wear my mask and wash my hands after going home.
I am the king of the ring.
Welcome to the Japan What Podcast, episode 205. And I am your host, Matthew PMBigelow.com. And I'm coming at you from the Aizumicho Studios in Shinjuku, Tokyo, Japan. The armpit of Asia. Covering Japan Society 5.0, the supply chain wars, rising conflict in the Indo-Pacific, depopulation, migration, and more. We thank you for coming along the adventure that is today's show. Busy day as usual, moving into spring. I went into the National Gardens of Japan called Shinjuku Gyoen. Just around the corner from the Aizumicho Studios here. A hop, skip, and a jump. And the cherry blossoms, many of which were in full bloom. Now, it's famous that Japan has a cherry blossomometer where they will tell you what part of Japan is blooming when. And that's generally true, but Shinjuku Gyoen is just a little bit different because they have so many different types of cherry blossom trees, which gives people ample room to come and go to different sections of the park and see the cherry blossoms in full bloom. And because we are a tourism magnet now, I had the privy of wandering through the cherry blossoms, surrounded by a kaleidoscope of faces. None of them, well, very few of them were Japanese, mostly Indians and Chinese, jostling and running to and fro, trying to get the best pictures of the cherry blossoms. Yeah. And I have, actually there were some people just scrolling through their social media and Punjabi music, or just Punjabi dialogue, you know, how people scroll on TikTok now. Get a little, it was just that on full volume. And I'm kind of going, geez, things sure have changed. I remember going to Shinjuku Gyoen during the pandemic when almost nobody was there. Maybe we need another one. Fingers crossed. It's not all that bad. Or is it? I don't know. I found myself living in a mass tourism zone, and I've never enjoyed mass tourism. I've traveled all over the world, usually as a solo traveler. And one place in particular that stuck out to me as tourism and nothing but tourism was a place called Nice in France. I transferred there on the train. I was going from Marseille up to a castle town in Toscana in one day, and we had to stop at Nice. And it was just endless suitcases. Everybody's confused. Everything is an approximation of French culture. And it has like a Disneyland sheen or gravy poured all over it. Like it's a representation of an idealization of something that nobody really wants or needs. And that's kind of what it's like. So I don't know what to do, actually. Don't know what to do. I've always loved living in Tokyo, but I've never wanted to be the guy living in a mass tourism zone, and that's exactly where I found myself. So challenges await. The trajectory is pointing towards challenges as opposed to living it easy, like I did from 2010 to 2020, making good coin, working hard, playing lots of music. Then something happened. I wonder what that was. We're going to take a look at some news here today, and it's going to be more economic focused, supply chain war focused. We'll see if we have time for Society 5.0, although as the singularity approaches, and I'm not really a singularitarian. I can never remember how it's said. We're being pushed in that way. And when I first started covering AI on this podcast 5 years ago, because I worked in big tech from 2015 to 2020, doing just that, just being a researcher for IoT, AI, market trends in these areas for 5 years for one of the major telecommunication companies in Japan, for their vice presidents, their AI engineers, experimental roboticists, and so on. So it's just like 5 years of constant research based on that area. It's been 5 years almost exactly to the day since I left, as some sort of virus was spreading that, led to many people losing their jobs and trajectories in life, yours included, yours truly. The 5 years ago, it wasn't really such a thing. It would be kind of, hey, there's this goofy thing, or here's a surveillance apparatus. But now it's just everywhere all the time. And it's like a black hole, and it's sucking everything into it, which I guess is what a singularity is. In this case, it's when the capability of AI will equate and then exceed the capability of humans. And undoubtedly, we are moving in that direction in many ways, whether it's the large language models with AI agents that can now do and outperform many high-level jobs, including medical, legal, copywriting, all those things, and into robotics. And I don't mean the goofy humanoid robotics that do like a flip, which is very impressive, but the factory robots and things like that, where it's just the shelves themselves become robots and organize themselves into patterns depending on customer orders in real time and stuff like that. It's like the factory has a mind of its own, or a mind owned by a major corporation. Now the corporation has its logo stamped on that mind, and now is that corporation in a way conscious? Such philosophical meanderings used to piss me the hell off. No, it's just a shelf, damn it. But moving into the future, as the singularity approaches, we have the supply chain war, which I like to cover. And that as well, it's becoming more about shipping lanes and conflict, but also everything else that's being entwined into it, whether it's automobile manufacturing or consumer goods or war itself. It's all converging, and it's converging at a very rapid rate. I used to be able to keep my arms around it, but now I compared it to like running around with a teaspoon, and there's 12 fire hydrants, and they're all blasting water at full blast in every direction, and you're trying to scoop it up and make sense of it. 'Tis overwhelming, so you have to pick and choose, and that's what we're doing today. But before we get into the main crux, because for some reason, most people are still living in like a paused version of 1999 or 2000. A lot of the stereotypes. Once we still have the legacy media, but the new media doesn't give us any kind of, for the most part, and I mean like TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, it doesn't actually give us much insight into what's happening in the present and into the future, even though that's what those companies are. They are the present and they are the future. And a lot of the legacy media, like newspapers and stuff like that, are often locked into some sort of stereotype from 1999 or 2005, 2006. But now it's 2025. And we have to update our firmware as to what's going on in the world. Like, for example, in 2005, nobody really thought of China as a competent technology hub. It was a cheap place with lots of fake goods. Japan was the world's second GDP. Now it's tumbling even further down. America wasn't that obese. Now it is. Germany wasn't turning off all of its energy production capabilities to satisfy the demands of people like Greta Thunberg, but now they are. So, and we have the supply chain wars, we have the G7, we have BRICS. There's all these things that are happening. And one thing that's important to consider is how Japan is faring. And I've been here for like 18, 19 years now, and it's not doing as good as it used to. Simply said, still fine, still peaceful. I do find myself in a myriad of a kaleidoscope of faces, and I realize that's a little hypocritical to say, as I am very white And now I'm surrounded by people from all over the world. But I liked it that's the previous way more so than I do now. There used to be more money. There used to be more business. Talking to people about this in the countryside. Not that the countryside is empty of businesses, but there does seem to be a certain shrinking going on in certain ways as more and more people shift towards online shopping, which concentrates things into the data centers that I mentioned before that are now borderline conscientious, stamped with corporate logos on them. This comes to us from intellinews.com, and I found it somewhere else, but I just like to use a variety of sources on the Japan What podcast, because why not? It's fun. Intellinews.com, never been there before. In a way, it's more interesting than just scrolling past people going into 7-Eleven on TikTok. I get a lot of that for some reason. Although I don't spend much time on TikTok, I just kind of advertise there, and they get sucked into 10 minutes of scrolling before I go, I gotta get out of here. Poland's adjusted income to overtake Japan's by 2026. Even in 2012, 2013, 2014, Poland was seen as a place that was not doing very well, and they had a massive diaspora in places like England operating as kind of borderline illegal builders. And the logic at the time was, well, the British builders take too long, so people contract with these Poles, and bada bing, bada boom. But now Poland is adjusted to become one of the highest GDP per capita, or PPP, constant in the world. So Poland's adjusted income to overtake Japan's by 2026. So now Poland is going to be better than Japan. New GDP per capita, PPP data. And what's PPP? It's like, PPP data. I covered it before. What does it mean? Come on, AI. It's purchasing power parity data. I knew it was something like that, but I forgot that it was parity, purchasing power parity. And some people say it's a more accurate way to measure GDP because of the cost of living and all these other things. I'm not sure if that's true or not true. But anyways, that's what they're using here at intellinews.com. They sound pretty smart. New GDP per capita PPP data from the World Bank suggests that Poland's GDP adjusted income is likely to overtake that of Japan by 2026. Based on the current growth projections from the International Monetary Fund, World Economic Outlook in April 2024, Poland is fast catching up with Japan in per capita income terms. Japan's growth has been lackluster in recent years. We're going to get into that today. This is the main point of the podcast. It was recently overtaken by Russia, and the size of its economy was knocked into fifth place as Russia became the fourth largest economy in the world in PPP, purchase power parity, adjust terms according to the World Bank. That's going to be a major one too in today's focus. So when I came here 20 years ago, Japan was number 2 by far. And then a few years later, China. And then Germany. It's like, how did Germany get ahead of Japan? They've shut off their nuke plants and they just demolished their most advanced coal power plant. And they're shutting down Volkswagens and they're exporting a lot of their manufacturing into China. How does it? Oh, because Japan's yen has crashed. One of the top 4 largest economy, 3 now are BRICS members, China, India, and Russia. The U.S. was the second largest in adjusted terms and the largest in nominal terms. In general, the emerging markets are growing much faster than the developed markets. Again, main part of today's show. Germany has also slid down the rankings and was knocked into 6th place by Russia. Poland's rise is an exception for Europe, where most of the major economies are close to recession, thanks to the boomerang effect of sanctions. Insane policy enacted by poor leaders who are ideologically driven and do not look at reality as reality itself, but as reality as something that exists in their minds as they've already reached, and everybody else needs to be dragged into their brains in order for them to agree with everything else that's happening. The Russian economy is currently flourishing, according to the latest Bank of Russia macroeconomic survey, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to go into it too much, but that's the reality we're living in now, where for my whole life until very recently, Japan's economy good, jobs good, people working hard, Lots of money, lots of travel, lots of consumption, lots of importing, lots of exporting. But in just a few years, we've gone down and are now set to be overtaken by the Poles. Congratulations, Poland, by the way. Good job. You did it. I've seen a lot of travel documentaries from Poland recently, and it looks quite nice. When I was in high school in the mid to late 90s, we had a few exchange students from Eastern Europe, and I got to know quite a few of them. Some of them came from like Czech Republic, some from sort of the far east of Germany and things like that. It's not Eastern Europe, the far east of Germany, but it's getting out there. And they would send me letters during summer break and stuff like that. And it would just be like the neo-Nazis, and like it was real neo-Nazis. Like the economy is in shambles, and people are so poor here. We can't. People just wear secondhand clothes, and then now it's 30 years later, and the prosperity there is incredible. It's notable. It's beyond notable. It's enviable. And in places that are other places, we're seeing a vast difference in what's going down. So I came across this graph here, and this graph is basically focusing on a lot of, it's a nutshell of what I was discussing earlier. As the singularity approaches, more and more aspects get sucked into its the gravity of its approaching black hole, and we have to be specific on what we discuss now. Otherwise, it's just nothing. It's just too much. If you talk about everything, you're talking about nothing. As a wise man once said. And this one's called China's car exports. And of course, Japan is featured into this as well. And this graph is focused on millions of cars exported on a monthly or year-on-year basis. We're just going to focus on the year-on-year here. And this goes back to 2014. And in 2014, China exported 1 million cars. And it was the bottom of the other countries, Germany, Japan, China, and the U.S. The top one for the while, like until mid-2015, 2016, Germany, Japan, and the U.S. were all kind of in the same zone, sometimes overpassing, sometimes losing ground to each other. But the United States from 2017 to 2024 dropped from 4 million exports per year in 2016 down to 1.3 or 4 million exports in 2024. So 4 million to 1.3. That's a huge decrease in just a period of basically 10 years. But China from 2016 went from 1 million, so it's still that hovering 1 million line a year. It went to 6,400,000 exported cars in 2024. The top. China is now the world's leading car exporter. But in 2020, it was still at the bottom. And in 2021, things started picking up quite rapidly. And in 2022, it went past the United States. In middle of 2022, it went past Germany. And in the beginning of 2023, it went past Japan. So in the period of 2 years, it overtook market share from the world's leading auto exporters. Just like that. And Japan went down in 2019, 2020. Germany went down significantly at the same time. And America went down significantly at the same time. China went down a little bit, but then saw an incredible recovery. And then it overtook everybody else to become, like I said, the world's largest car exporter. Now, cars are not what they used to be. Now cars are kind of emblematic of all of a nation's advanced technology combined and packaged into an item that people buy for their families and for their lives. They have sensors, computers, of course, self-driving capabilities. We're moving into self-driving, like I said, cameras everywhere. the networking, all of these things, surveillance, security, connecting to satellites, all these things. So 50 years ago, a car was rather simpler compared to now. So this is the idea of the singularity opening up its black hole and sucking everything into it. So in a way, the vehicle is emblematic of an entire country's ability to establish supply chains, to manufacture advanced technologies, and to develop advanced technologies and sell them to people at a rate where it creates massive amounts of competition. So it's quite a feat to be able to do such a thing. Maybe even more so than launching satellites at this point, which is why so few countries can do it. So few countries can launch satellites because they're just not suited. They don't have access to an equatorial suitable geographical location. But with the know-how of automobile exports, we have the shipping, the supply, the labor, the workforce, the intelligence, the engineering, the education. It's all a big part of it. So how did this happen? It's the supply chain war. If you remember, Wuhan is a city that changed our lives. I remember calling it the Wuhan flu 5 years ago, and a lot of people called me racist for it. Remember that? They followed the science, and they said that was racist. And here we are 5 years later. Is it still racist? We call it COVID-19. Anyways, Wuhan at that time was a major manufacturing hub. I've talked about this a lot. It was a major manufacturing hub for telecommunication equipment and for automobile manufacturing. And it was a bottleneck in the world. But when the Chinese government closed down Wuhan, locked it down for the virus, it wasn't that the bottlenecking created pandemonium worldwide. It was the fact that the factory shut down, so all of the chip makers repurposed their supply chains, their foundries, their supply lines, their factory lines. That's what I mean to say. So then all of a sudden you had a major shift in the amount of chips being made by a very few select companies, mainly the Taiwan ones, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturer, TSMC, maybe some Samsung. They all shifted to electronics because everyone was locked down and they were receiving free money, so everybody started ordering electronics. And that led to a massive chip shortage for the automobile sector. And it led to a massive and then Japan was hit hard, specifically by not only the chip shortage. Japan used to be a chip maker. It still is to some extent, but it doesn't really have the capacity or the know-how to do it at the scale that it used to and to the requirements that are demanded now. There was a cyber attack and a fire. So was this intentional? I don't know. We had so many weird fires and things going on in the past few years of just seemingly random, like, oh, this major building is on fire and it's like a transceiver or a transponder, and this is a chicken factory that's on fire, and now the price of eggs are going up. So we just had so many random events. There was also a cyber attack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a summary that kind of explains from the Japanese perspective inside of this car exports graph how we managed to get into the position where we are now, where just at the beginning of 2019, Japan was the world's largest car exporter and third largest economy. And now, simply 5-6 years later, Japan is no longer holding the top car exporter title and is now falling behind Poland in terms of GDP PPP. So let's take a look at that right now. It's a little data centric, but good luck. Japan's car production dropped sharply from 9.7 million vehicles in 2019 to 8.1 million in 2020, a 16.5% decline due to COVID-19 disruptions and the chip shortage, worsened by a 2021 Renesas factory fire, that's a chip producer, a 2022 cyber attack on a Toyota supplier, and a 2024 Noto Peninsula earthquake. I know there's earthquake weapons. Now, just to clarify, I'm willing to believe that the factory fire and the cyber attack were deliberate to push Japan's auto capacity down, but I'm not sure if the earthquake weapon was used for the Noto Peninsula earthquake. That could just be just things getting worse. Toyota cut output by 40% in 2021, and Japan's focus on hybrids over BEVs, just 2% of production in 2023, left it trailing as global demand shifted to EVs, where China surged ahead. This part here is iffy because, as we know now, EV sales are trailing. But during that period, they went up quite a bit. And depending on where you're exporting to, demand for EVs might be higher or lower depending on that population. Production recovered to 8.5 million by 2024, but was still down 4.5% from 2023. The chip shortage, triggered by Wuhan's 2020 lockdown and misjudged chip orders, exposed global supply chain fragility, costing the auto industry $210 billion. With Japan's reliance on domestic suppliers like Renesas amplifying its struggles. Meanwhile, Japan's export recovery lagged, reaching 4.22 million by December 2024, compared to China's 6.4 million, as shown in the chart. An aging population, economic stagnation, and an output drop limited Japan's rebound, contrasting with China's EV-driven export dominance. So, how is China able to go into there? Well, China used its own chips. And when all of the sanctions were placed on Russia by the G7, and when Russia was kicked out of SWIFT, China sold to Russia all their cars. And then China had this a glut of EVs. So they just dumped them all over the world, cheap. And this factors into the fact that BYD, one of China's leading EV makers, has a fleet of ships for roll-on, roll-off delivery. So they're expanding and developing the infrastructure and the resilience that they don't need to rely on other people. And when disruptions occur, like closing down Wuhan, I'm leaning towards like the closure of Wuhan may have been for the virus, but then it may have also been to attack the supply chains because they knew what would happen. And then they would have their own abilities to rebound after that. And due to poor leadership in the G7, when they closed Russia off, China just entered that market. And then as China expands into the global south, they are able to deliver all of their excess product to the global south. And they often barter now. They'll just barter. We don't want your money. We just want your stuff. So here, take 30,000 cars and we'll take 30,000 tons of whatever blah, blah, blah we need from you. Something like that. And that's how we are in the position that we are in today, based on that one graph. And it's all shifting very rapidly indeed. I'll be including this chart. I suggest you check it out at MatthewPMBigelow.com. Go check it out because it's just a chart, but it's an example of the effects of the singularity that we are being dragged into. And like I said, I'm not really a singularitarian. Don't really like it that much, but a lot of these people are, and they see the race to be the first in on the singularity as basically 500 years of longevity for their company and reputation. So if you're number one in the singularity, it's guaranteed 500 years of profits with your name stamped on it. Just like how they have the name stamped on the consciousness of the factories and warehouses now. That's moving into the future. And if you think about it, this whole idea of putting all these low Earth satellites into orbit could be as a way to capture the Earth's atmosphere and turn Earth as into a floating hive mind of biosilicon hardware symbiosis, where we're all on our phones implementing likes and emotional reactions into social media platforms. And then all the algorithms are automating all the factories on Earth and the surveillance state and all that. There's so much activity going on wirelessly inside of the Earth's atmosphere. It's essentially lighting, kindling on fire, and creating an alternative form of mass consciousness. And now the Earth itself is alive. It's kind of anti-Christian because now we have these Gaia worshipers literally creating like a techno-Gaia goddess that is controlled by them in a way, but not controlled by them. It just has their name stamped on it. But now they kind of have this idea that they can control a whole planet as a form of consciousness with their name stamped on it. Die for the war, everybody move. Die for the good, die for the war, die for the war. That's the supply chain war. Pretty wacky stuff. But as we move into this future, it's gonna get pretty wacky if it's not already. I know I was just talking about GDP, but all that stuff about singularitarian consciousness of the world and making a Gaia that's anti-Christian, as like this Luciferian pact. I don't know. It's kind of it's wacky. I get that, but how what if it's created by accident, as those who pursue the singularity for profit pop out of the other end of a black hole into a world that they never dreamed would ever existed. They thought it would just bring us convenience, but really they animated a planet's atmosphere into consciousness. What we're going to do next is to kind of to pile onto this idea based on that graph. It's so interesting. It's like just so many things happened. And the G7 got judo flipped. Now with Trump in charge and with Japan wondering what to do with that as well, we're not sure exactly what's going on the G7 side of the supply chain war. But it does seem that with all of the recent tariffs that the Americans want to put onto the auto industry, something like 25% for all imported autos. Well, the United States just did lose most of their market share over the past 10 years. Wouldn't it make sense for them to claw some of it back? So a Corvette or a Ford or a Chevrolet inside of the U.S., if it's 25% cheaper than a BMW, people are probably just going to choose that. Now, I'm not sure how Japan's going to be affected by this because Japan has so many plants and things like that exist inside the United States. So I'm not sure if the fear is just reactionary or what we're supposed to do, but I'm not sure how it's going to roll out in terms of Japan. But like I said, it's just not about cars. It's about the chips inside of the cars. It's about the self-driving capabilities. It's about the price point as well. I, for one, don't need the best of the best. I'm happy with something half the price that does half the stuff because in 5 years, the best of the best is not going to be that great anyways. So there's this whole line of thinking across a wide range of consumers. But above that, on the infrastructural level, which is enabling all of this insane activity, there's a whole bunch of conflicting and overlapping events going on. And I'm going to just read some ideas from the chip markets and data center markets and AI markets and see where it's heading. So this one comes to us from japantoday.com, and it's released on March 27th, 2025. We're recording this on March 28th, 2025. Rapidus teams up with Singapore's Quest Global to produce AI chips. Japan's state-backed chip venture Rapidus Corp and engineering services provider Quest Global Services Pre-Limited headquarters in Singapore have agreed to team up to develop low-power AI semiconductors. Under their partnership, Quest Global will help Rapidus and its customers to design state-of-the-art 2-nanometer semiconductors for AI use. Okay, so 2 nanometers is very, very small. A lot of the stuff that was used in China were like 50 or 60 nanometers, but they were still good enough for the cars, good enough for the cars to sell, good enough for the cars to export by the millions. You didn't need the 2 nanometers. Same thing with Russia's economy. They had the dishwashers with chips in them. War starts, they start making bombs with the same chips in them. And people are like, oh, dishwasher bombs, you're idiots. Well, they work. Next one. Battery materials plant in Finland starts construction and in a joint venture with China's eSpring. Okay, so the batteries are needed for these cars. Finnish Materials Group and China Beijing eSpring Material Technology have decided to start the construction of a cathode active material plant. The 800 million euro plant to be constructed in Finland will produce CAM, which is needed to produce lithium-ion batteries. The plant's first stage capacity will be 60,000 tons of cathode active material per year. The plans also include the possibility of expanding production in the future. Notice how it's not Germany going in there into Finland. It's China. Well, China is supposed to be not our friend, but it's our friend. We just do business there. U.S. blacklists over 50 Chinese companies in bid to curb Beijing's AI chip capabilities. The United States has added dozens of Chinese entities to its export blacklist. They come at a time when tensions between China and Beijing. Well, I'm not sure if the tensions are rising, but the competitive edge is certainly being reformulated. Dozens of Chinese entities were targeted for their alleged involvement in developing advanced AI, supercomputers. Among the organizations were 6 subsidiaries of Chinese cloud computing firm Inspur Group. And China's foreign ministry said late Wednesday it strongly condemns the export restrictions. So 50 is quite a lot, but we'll see what happens because Finland, I know that this materials plant or cathode plant is not the same, but it's not as if people are not clamoring to work with China at this point. And like I said, China just became the world's largest automobile exporter. Back to Japan. SoftBank strengthens AI strategy. SoftBank Corp, my alumni, I graduated from there in 2020. Strengthens AI strategy by acquiring data center semiconductor company Ampere Computing for approximately 970 billion yen in cash. Ampere Computing was founded in 2017 by former Intel president Renee James and designs server microprocessors based on the ARM architecture. ARM is a chip maker also owned by SoftBank, purchased by the British owners, I think in 2018 or something like that. Ampere Computing processors are used in databases, media encoding, web services, network acceleration, mobile gaming, AI inference processing, and more. So there's that. Moving on to the next one. OpenAI close to finalizing $40 billion SoftBank-led funding. I know this isn't about cars, but a lot of these things will end up in the cars. And the car was just one example, but this is the idea of pouring a bunch of funding back into the United States. OpenAI is close to finalizing a $40 billion funding round led by SoftBank Group. The AI developers funding round would be the largest of all time. And as part of the deal, SoftBank will invest an initial $7.5 billion, and there will be a second tranche of $30 billion later this year. And just underscores the idea of adopting AI around the world, but we need the chips and the data centers to make that happen, and then the cars connect into those things. As kind of a loose way to connect it. But next up, Microsoft cancels up to 2 gigawatts of data center projects, follows reports of 200 megawatts of cancellations in the last month. Now, this ties into the next one, which is DeepSeek Volume 3 now runs at 20 tokens per second on Mac Studio, and that's a nightmare for OpenAI. So this is why it's connecting all together. DeepSeek is the Chinese open source large language model that can compete alongside with OpenAI, and OpenAI is partnered with Microsoft with Bill Gates, and Bill Gates with modular nuclear reactor industries. So the idea here was that AI was pumping itself up so much by saying we're going to need so many data centers, and they need to be equipped with their own individual nuclear power plants because we just need this much energy to fuel the AI revolution. And then these Chinese companies come out and undercut, just like with the cars. They come out and they undercut with their DeepSeek large language model that can run on a computer. So now all of a sudden, the mysticism behind OpenAI and Microsoft's buildup of OpenAI, requiring all this power and investment and control, remember it's about control, is suddenly vaporized. So this is as well as part of the supply chain war, where China undercuts Western value by popping the bubble that it's been developing by, basically they're sniffing their own farts here. They're not verifying any of these things. They're just trusting the tech bros. That goes back to what? That's fine. Moving on. China's Sea Carrier emerges as challenger to ASML and other chip tool titans. ASML, I believe, is a Netherlands company, and they have the most advanced lithography machinery and development and engineering in the world, and those are making the most advanced chips in the world. But now China's Sea Carrier emerges as a challenger. I'll just read this. This is from Nikkei Shimbun. A Chinese semiconductor equipment maker linked to Huawei has been quietly developing a wide range of machines to replace offerings by ASML and other foreign rivals to help China resolve the most painful supply chain choke point created by U.S. export controls. Shenzhen's Sea Carrier Tech, backed by Shenzhen government, has been developing equipment in chip fabrication and has set machines from companies such as ASML, Applied Materials, and Lam Research as its benchmark. The machines it is working on involve lithography, chemical vapor deposition, measurement, physical vapor deposition, etching, and atomic layer deposition, all fields that are currently dominated by companies from the Netherlands, U.S., and Japan. So that Sea Carrier ramping up the competition against ASML. So what does ASML have to say about this? Do they want to be toppled by the Chinese? Well, from the Register from March 10th, it says, ASML will open Beijing facility despite U.S. sanctions on China. So we have the Finns working with China to make the batteries, and now the world's most advanced lithography company, ASML, is moving into Beijing, despite Beijing openly challenging ASML. What's going on here? Chip-making tool biz ASML plans to open a new facility in China this year amid rising trade tensions between Washington and Beijing. The supplier of advanced lithography equipment disclosed in its latest annual report that it aims to inaugurate a Beijing-based reuse and repair center in 2025, recognizing the importance of China as one of its largest markets. This is a facility for reconditioning and reusing materials from systems that have been returned from the field, so it won't manufacture from scratch. I'm sure that'll be fine. The decision comes after the U.S. authorities extended a list of restrictions, blah, blah, blah. We don't really need to go into it that much, but I wonder what these people are thinking. Is it because of Nord Stream and Germany closing its nuclear power plants and a massive lack of energy competitive prices in Europe? Are they just going to China because China has all this extra energy that it can just dump into production despite not having any environmental regulations? So Europe outregulates itself on every angle and forces all of its advanced companies to go make deals with China where they can exist in a blind spot and do business there. The Europeans are so righteous, aren't they? Are they just righteous? I was mentioning earlier that in that graph that China was able to become the world's dominant car exporter by taking advantage of EV markets, but not everybody wants an EV. So this just to add some balance to make sure that we're not just drinking our own farts here. Toyota delays electric vehicle battery plant due to weak demand. Asahi Shimbun, March 24th. Toyota Motor Corp will postpone construction of a factory for lithium-ion batteries in Fukuoka Prefecture due to sluggish demand for electric vehicles in the global market. Or is it just because it's China-dominated? China dominated. They just make them for so cheap that there's no reason to compete against them. And Toyota's hybrid as well is also so good. Why would they diversify? Is that a reasonable and analytical point? In addition to lower expected demand, higher construction budgets due to surging costs for materials and labor were behind the decision. Yes, the cheap yen. Great for tourists, bad for research and development. Next, China EV giant BYD soars after 5-minute charging platform unveiled. Wait, I just thought that there was no demand for EVs, but now there's suddenly demand for EVs. Interesting how that works. Just depends where the demand is. Shares in Chinese EV giant BYD surged, this is from March 19th, to a record high Tuesday after it unveiled new battery technology it says can charge a vehicle in the same time it takes to fill up a car with gasoline. The company said the battery and charging system, called the Super E platform, boasted peak speeds of 1,000 kilowatts, allowing cars to travel up to 470 kilometers after being plugged in for just 5 minutes. The new technology aims to fundamentally solve users' charging anxiety, according to BYD founder Wang Chuanfu. Our pursuit is to make the charging time of electric vehicles as short as the refueling time of fuel vehicles, he said at the Monday's launch. I'm not going to go too much into it, but it's just, again, more overlapping and kind of not contradictory, but we're told that there's no EV market, so Toyota's not doing it. Well, but the costs are too high. But China's costs are so low because they have all this extra power, and they have a command economy with subsidies. So they make these cars, and then they sell them all over the world at a much lower price. And now BYD says they can charge your EV in 5 minutes. Honda and Subaru team up with semiconductor companies to develop proprietary chips for AI autonomous driving. So this is kind of bringing us back to the beginning of this segment here, looking at how this is all based on kind of using a modern car, as an emblem of us heading towards the singularity. As the car traverses through time, more and more technology gets incorporated into it. I'm not much of a car guy, but every time I go back to Canada every few years and I get into somebody's new minivan even, I'm blown away by the level of technology that's being incorporated into these things. And that does seem to be emblematic of a corporation's or a company's or a nation's ability to, manufacture, produce, deliver the goods, to make a competitive market, and see who wins by outcompeting each other on some sort of market-based tech operation. With an eye on the next generation software-defined vehicle, whose functions can be changed and expanded by software updates, traditional automakers have begun to get involved in the development of key devices, cutting-edge semiconductors called SoCs, or System on Chips. This is to keep up with the evolution of advanced driver assistance systems and autonomous driving, which are seen as the main value drivers of such vehicles. The competitiveness of SDVs depends on whether SoCs, so SDVs are software-defined vehicles and SoCs are just the chips, can achieve the computing power and low-power consumption required to withstand the addition of new functions. The core value of SDVs is in autonomous driving. That's what executives at Japanese automakers say. Tesla and emerging Chinese automakers have already put autonomous driving technology using generative AI into practical use and are trying to make it a new value for cars. Traditional Japanese automakers, who are late to the game, are also focusing on such developments. But these chips hold the company's keys. Get it? But more than 5 years have passed since Tesla Full Self-Driving has been released in June 2019, but many other main automakers are falling very much behind. So we have Honda and Subaru teaming up to kind of hopefully lend each other know-how and supply chains, because they might have a better thing and the other company might have a better thing. Combine those two things to create a more competitive supply chain to have these cars on the road and not fall behind. because they are going to be the future. Even Elon Musk said a lot of car companies are not going to survive this change, and I'm believing him more and more. As we're wrapping up here, I just wanted to read more headlines about data centers and Japan to see how Japan's trying to catch up. Now, if Japan can get its nuclear power plants back online and build data centers and give us cheaper energy, because I paid a 30,000 yen gas bill the other day. That was not fun. I live in a reasonably sized apartment in Tokyo. Not a mansion, not some wing of some estate. Japan's Mitsubishi Corp and JFE to build AI data center at Old Furnace site. Acquisition of an operational data center asset in Japan to be included in new Mitsui Data Center Fund. Mitsubishi Corp steelmaker JFE may build data center near Tokyo. Japan developing green energy-powered offshore data centers. Steelmaker JFE and Mitsubishi sign a memorandum of understanding to develop data centers outside Kawasaki. NVIDIA-backed firm eyes data center near nuclear power in Japan. This is from 2024. I wonder if I should put these are just like, I meant to do it in the past week, but it shows that it's ongoing. I think that's fine. Most of them were just in the past week, but I got down to where it starts going a few days ago and then weeks ago and stuff like that. Demand for capacitors and servers to quadruple by 2029, say Japan analysts. Japan's NIDEC scales up AI server cooling equipment as NVIDIA chips get hotter. Data centers worldwide. So that's Statistica. So there's the chips, there's the data centers, and the vehicle, again, is just one example of how it's all being used to drive us into the singularity. And what pops out on the other side of that could be convenience, or it could be an artificially controlled atmosphere peppered with silicon biological hardware-infused consciousness. Where do you think we're going with this? Is it that philosophical? Could be. It always keeps going up in these ladders. If you're working at a corporation, you never think of these things. You're just thinking, next quarter we got to do this thing and this thing. Oh, we got this new R&D thing over here. Well, let's see if we can sell it as a sort of software package to the enterprise division or something like that. It's never really that philosophical. But above that, who knows? Who knows where the underlying vibration is leading us? Is it towards a conscientious earth, Lucifer, enabled Gaia? Is it some anti-Christian plot by Satanists? I don't think so. I can never get past and these are Satanists. That's what you got to believe. No, I don't believe that. But I think there is something a little bit more going on. I think there is a massive opportunity. To be honest, I think the main leading, to summarize and wrap up here, without the proper leadership, we're going to continue falling behind. That is obvious. Say what you will about China and the CCP. I'm not exactly the biggest fans either. Russia as well. I think I like Russia. They're smart, though. They know what they're doing, and they have actual goals based on planning, as opposed to willy-nilly, eco-dreamy projects that tank economies and then force those governments to rely more and more on nations that have no environmental regulations and do business within blind spots there, such as Europe and China, European countries and China. So unless we can develop some clear leadership and not just rely on everybody else doing things for us, things will continue along the path they are on. I am convinced that the only way out is through. There is no going back. And it's tough to say what's going to happen, but in the short term, the trajectory is not focused on the up and up. That said, there's still lots of things to enjoy in life and blah, blah, blah. But on the meta level, there's something going on, and it's rife with activity. if I just focused on one of those news stories, it would just be a business relationship. But by focus on the Finns and the Chinese and the Netherlands ASML and the Chinese lithographers now and well, we don't need an EV battery plant because there's no demand. Oh, but look, BYD has all this demand, and in fact, they're the world's #1 exporter now because of this demand. So, if you look at it, there's a lot of contrasting elements, and this is stemming from the fact that we have two competing supply chains battling out right now for global dominance. There's the BRICS, and then there's the G7. And as we can see with the graphs over time, the BRICS now have the upper hand. Will the United States, along with Japan, be able to counter and develop their own safe and secure supply chain and enable some sort of long-term economic prosperity for their peoples? We have yet to see, but I hope we do. But the idea that's going to happen is probably in Japan not going to happen, because Japan is ranked 124th out of 124 for the world's leading AI researchers and developers. So we are in a long train. At the head of the train, they're moving us in a direction. Japan is in train 124, and we're in this carriage on this train with our opinions, but we're certainly being sucked along a path. So that's going to be the podcast for today. Remember to go to MatthewPMBigelow.com, check out the links, check out the photos there, and take a look at that graph, because that graph that I was talking about earlier, it's not only just sales are going up, it represents policy decisions, it represents chips, it represents warfare, it represents using a bio attack on humanity as a way to garner control of the Earth's supply chains and create a new global hegemon with currency outside of the U.S. dollar. That's what's going on here, everybody. Until next time, I bid thee a very warmful and heartful Ja Mata
In 2019, Japan's wheels did hum. 9 million cars from factories did roll. But 2020 brought a darkened sun. A plague, a shortage took a heavy toll. The chips ran dry, Renesas burned in flame. A cyber strike and quake did strike once more. Toyota's lines cut 40 for the shame. The hybrid stalled in waves, the world implied. Production fell 8 million, grim and stark. An aging land with growth a mere thin thread. Domestic sales so flat left markets dark, and exports lagged as China surged ahead. It's not in the future, it's happening now on the Japan One podcast. From Wuhan streets, a virus shook the globe. Chip orders faltered, supply chains did break. 200 billion lost, the autos cried as fires, quakes, and hacks did plague the land. BVVs by 2%, Japan denied the global shift while China's U-dance signed. Exports at 4.2, a modest climb, yet China soared to 6.4 so fast. Japan's old ways outpaced by modern time, its factories down, a shadow of the past. A lesson clear in chips and tech we see. Adapt or fade, Japan's new destiny. It's not